Seattle King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
Hey y'all, it's Traffic Jam with Kareem.
Thursday at 4 p.m.
Hey, Traffic Jam. Brandon Avenue Radio, download the app so you don't miss out what's popping with Cracker Shannon. It's your boy, Cream the Dream, on another beautiful week on here on Traffic Jam in Seattle. I hope you guys doing what you're supposed to do, being you're supposed to be. I got a good show for y'all, a lot to talk about, Kareem the Dream, keep up with everything.
Get your entertainment news with Kareem on the Traffic Jam, Thursday at 4 p.m.
So I needed to check my kids' immunization records for their school. My doctor told me I could get them quickly online, but I couldn't figure out how. Thankfully, I could turn to Link to Care WA for help. With Link to Care WA, I was able to learn how to use online health portals, use telehealth to talk to my doctor virtually, and even apply for jobs online. I called their free hotline and got help from a real person. Call Link to Care WA at 866-757-1832 or visit linktocarewa.org.
You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, RainierAvenueRadio.world, and on Twitter at RainierAvRadio.
Welcome to a pivotal moment in the world of broadcast as we proudly present the Men's Mental Health Show featuring the renowned Larry Mabry in collaboration with the Maassen Group. This essential exploration of men's mental health wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of RainierAvenueRadio.world. Now, let's dive into this crucial conversation with Larry Mabry and the Maassen Group. Your mental well-being matters. Here's Larry Mabry.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to this. What are we in? 2026, January 5th, 2026. It's a beautiful Monday here in Seattle. Just want to check in, see how everyone's doing. Really appreciate the Thought Life message for those people that tapped in, like what he was talking about. Brad, as well as his guest, Cedric. Beautiful message. Today, we're going to talk about something called forgiveness. And I want to kind of talk about this because as I sit down with my clients, I would say when I was on this journey for myself many years ago, as far as healing, you always think that forgiveness is about the other person, but actually forgiveness is about you. And the best way I can explain it is if you imagine, right, if you point your finger at somebody, right, I'll just use an example. If you notice, if you're pointing your finger, people definitely want to try to direct the energy towards someone else, but they don't realize if you look carefully, you see three fingers pointing right back at you. And that's how powerful forgiveness is. And so I want to kind of address that today. And so why is it important, right? And so for me, it's vital because if you do not forgive, what happens is you tend to have a lens that is clouded. And so you don't have what I would call an authentic viewpoint in which you handle things. And so as you forgive yourself, what happens is you end up forgiving the individuals who cause harm to you, right? And what I realized too is everybody comes from different walks of life. Everyone has a certain type of vision or point of view in which they see the world. And yes, you have certain intentions in which, people have certain directives towards you. But what I realized in my 53, soon to be 54 this month, actually, 53 years of living is typically what you put out comes back. And so I want to talk about that because really, really important. And so if you're in a space where, you forgive people, right, what happens is a lot of times things will come at you and it'll just kind of slide off you, right? And I'll give you an example. So for those people that's been tapped in, you guys notice I've talked a little bit about my stepdad. I've talked a little bit about my dad. And for those people that know, I've been kind of being his guardian, Michigan. And, I would say growing up, there's been some challenges. And initially, it was like, oh, I didn't really want to do this. I actually went to my sister, because she actually lives in Michigan, was like, hey, I need you to handle that. Universe is like, nah, today, brother. So long story short, I realized that the universe had a particular purpose for me. And my dad and I, we worked through a lot of things, but sometimes there's things that's hidden, right? Growing up, dad wasn't really there. My stepdad was there. And as he and I have kind of formed a relationship, I realized that there's a lot of challenges that he had with his dad growing up that I didn't really know, right? And, when you're older, you're more mature, you're able to have those conversations. You grow, you mature, you see things from different points of view. And so what I realized was, as I forgave my dad, as I forgave myself, because, raise your hand if you made mistakes. Yeah, I'll be the first one to say it. And so at the end of the day, you have to be honest with your mistakes and the ish you put out there, right? And so you want to make sure you realize that as you put out ish that's not really appropriate, you want to make sure that the universe back wave that comes back to you is giving you grace. And so what I realized was, what I put out is what I want to come back. And so as I understood my dad's world more, and I took a step back and I handled things from a more mature lens point. And I asked myself, I said, hey, in the event that I'm in a situation, God forbid, but if I'm in a situation, I don't have any biological children, but like, who would take care of me? And I sat with myself for that minute and I was like, wow, ooh, man, there's really no one that would take care of me. And then I asked myself, okay, so just on a human level, right? Like, how would you want someone to be taken care of, right? And so I thought about that, and you want someone to be taken care of with love, with care, with respect, and there's Bible verses that talks about how you treat your parents, comes back to you. And I remember a certain passage with Jesus when he was a boy. I remember, I forget the passage, but basically, long story short, his parents left him. They were at this particular event. They left him. They thought that he went with them during the event. And then they ended up talking to their friends or whatever, came back and realized that he was kicking it with the, I want to say, the clergy of the time. Now, he was like, I want to say in his teens, right? Maybe 12 or so, 13, early 12 or early youth or whatever. And he was having these conversations. And they realized then that, his wisdom was beyond his years. And so I'm bringing that story up because I realized that, even in that situation, his mom, and they were like, yo, okay, we understand, we're here, but, why do you tell us that you were here? And he basically was like, did you not know that I was here? Type of thing. And kind of came from a higher lens point, and the mom kind of got frustrated or whatever. And she said, okay, come with us. Right. And even though he was operating at a high level in terms of his spirituality, he still was obedient, which meant that he basically followed suit. He respected his mom. He went, he didn't come with backlip and that type of thing. And so for those that know, I was raised with the particular religious Bible and that type of thing. I would say as I matured and came to know the religious perspective from my point of view, I would say I became more spiritual. But one thing I realized was I do realize that I have to have honor with my dad. And with that being said, I had to heal certain things because with the fact that when you lose a particular person in your life, you realize that you only have them for a certain period of time. So at some point I had to make a choice and say, you know what, am I going to hold this frustration or am I going to heal it? And so I brought that up because I noticed, my dad and I had these conversations. And as I started really healing within myself, all of a sudden I noticed that my dad, he started becoming more compassionate. He started becoming more respectful. He started becoming more understanding, right? Because I started changing myself. And so I wanted to bring that out because what I realized was as you forgive yourself, you create that link, and that olive branch for other people to become more forgiving towards you. We laugh more. We have, some very interesting conversations. And then I just realized that at the end of the day, he did the best he could. Right. And I think for me, I noticed there's mistakes I've made. There's certain people that I realize that I cannot communicate with them anymore because they're gone. And I, have a recommendation for that because sometimes you're in those situations if you're in that situation where you want to forgive someone, and let's say, they left the country, or, they're no longer here, one recommendation I would have is to write a letter, put your heart out, express that, and burn a letter and let it go to the universe. Because at the end of the day, what I realize is the forgiveness is for you. It's not so much for them, it's for you. And if you lift that weight, if you lift that understanding, if you are open to hear what people have to say, or at least to create that bridge where you are forgiving, you create that space and more bandwidth to allow other things in, right? Other loving things in. And what I noticed was, as I forgave, it opened me up to more things, right? And so that's something that people don't talk about. But a lot of times when you carry a lot of weight, it has to take space, right? Energy is never destroyed, right? Created or destroyed. And so if you are thinking about like being upset and that type of thing, it holds a space. But if you forgive, you let it go, what happens is it opens you up for more wisdom. And what I realized was, as my dad and I had started to interact more, was he did the best he could. In his situation, his dad didn't know how to show him love. And so, it was like, okay, Larry, how are you going to move forward? Are you going to recreate the same wheel? Or are you going to say, you know what, done with that, I'm going to change that up? And I realized for myself that I needed to be more proactive about creating the universe that I desire to be in. And I was always inspired by Gandhi. He always talked about be the change you want to be. And I remember being in elementary school, I used to read that. Be the change you want to be. Be the change you want to be. And following him and realizing that he had a very non-aggressive approach. And I was very moved by that. And I noticed as I follow like Jesus and just higher level beings, I noticed that I appreciated their approach, right? And so I asked myself, how could I, from my place of being, how could I be more loving, right? And so the biggest thing is to be more forgiving, right? And I remember there was a verse in the Bible. I think someone asked Jesus, okay, so let's say that somebody offends you 7 times. He's like, how many times you should forgive them? And he said 70 times 7, which I thought was deep, right? And so basically he was trying to illustrate that there's no limit, right? That you just forgive, because at the end of the day, it's not about that person, it's about you. And so with that being said, there's been some challenges, but I would say overall, we've materialized a more healthy relationship, a more understanding with that. And then I've noticed that with other people, I'm a little bit more understanding of those individuals, right? And so I want to say that, right? And so within the forgiveness, I wanted to kind of talk about some key elements to forgiveness and how it benefits you. So the one thing that's going to really benefit you with forgiving yourself is it's going to develop what we call personal well-being, right? If you learn how to forgive yourself, you can do certain practices, mantras, different types of meditations, breath work, journaling, walking out in nature, letting things go. It's going to reduce your stress level like off the chart. That's the first thing. You're going to also practice stopping, like replaying certain types of, sometimes you kind of get into that, the old arguments in your head, you ruminate over things. It's gonna, like I said earlier, that takes up a lot of mental space. And so if you practice letting that go, and then you can insert other things, right? And this is something I've worked on that's been very beneficial. So when you're frustrated with something, you let it go. Insert something that you desire, right? And so if you're frustrated, maybe you might say something like, you know what, in this moment, everything is good, right? And practice being in the moment. And then if you're frustrated, just say, you know what, okay, in 5 minutes from now, I'll be calm. And maybe set the timer, right? And then at that 5-minute timer, practice being calm. I mean, by breathing, those types of things. And you'll notice a big difference. Also, too, when stress comes to you, as you practice this, you'll notice that your body will start to change, because when you have certain types of stressors and you don't forgive yourself, typically your body responds in a different way. But as you practice these different things, you notice your body will be more responsive towards healing. Okay, another thing too, better physical health. You'll notice by letting go of resentment, it's going to lower tension in your body. Headaches are going to go away, stomach aches, stress, tightness. You won't be carrying that emotional stress. That's a big one. Another thing that people take for granted too is improved mental clarity, improved mood, emotional stability. Very, very important. You'll see things, you notice them, but you breathe it out and you just let it roll right off, right? You're able to kind of see things for what they are with no judgment, right? I would say the last 10 years, that's something I've been really working on that's really changed my life. Is it easy? No, but it's something you have to practice. And I mean, there have been people that I've had courses with, there's been issues what I've had with certain people. And I had to sit with that, right? But at the end of the day, when you sit with that, at the end of the day, you have to say, you know what? That's their choice. And then you got to decide from where you are in that moment what choice you're going to make, right? And initially, you know, you might want to go back to the old ways, right? Which might be to harm or to spout out some negative things or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's going to affect you. And I think I talked about this before, but there was this guy who did this research where he was on stage and he brought up some people from the stage, and he talked about how what you say comes back to you, and he gave a proof of situations. So he had one gentleman stand up and he had him hold up his arms. And he said, okay, so what I want you to do is hold up your arms and I'm going to say some things to you, right? And then I'm going to be quiet and I want you to say some things out to me. So they did it, right? And then when a gentleman said some things out to the actual person who was doing the speech, the gentleman grabbed his arm and he moved his arm down, okay? And he said, okay, now what I wanted you to do, we're going to flip it. I want you to say positive things about me and then positive things about yourself. And so the gentleman did that. And then when he grabbed his arm, it was immovable, right? And so what that proved was like what we put out affects us more than the other person, right? And so I thought that was very powerful. And when I learned that, I realized I'm like, wow, I got to be careful of what I put out. So think about like a lot of negative talk that you may say about yourself, right? And sometimes it's subconscious. Sometimes there might be things that you learn from your, like how you grew up, or it could be the community, you know, or it could be self-concept, right? That's not true. Maybe you don't think very highly of yourself because you grew up in a household where maybe mom never said anything positive because, you know, she wasn't around your dad. And because of what she felt about your dad, she projected that on you, right? And so you grew up with this particular thought form thinking that you're not anything, which is not correct. But if you heard that all the time, then it may be a challenge for you to forgive yourself, right? Maybe you look at, and this is something I want to talk about too. A lot of times, you know, we look at these particular images, you know, these particular visions or whatever, and we compare ourselves to other people, right? You might say as a man, oh, I don't have a 6-pack. Okay, I don't have an 8-pack or whatever. But God made you perfect the way you are, right? I don't recall, you know, Jesus rolling out with a 6, you know what I'm saying? But my point is, it's all about, you know, you being the perfect person you are for yourself, right? And wherever you are in your body, it's like that you're still beautiful, right? But it starts from here as well as your mind. And so it's important to be careful and mindful what you put out about yourself, right? Another thing too, you'll have more mental focus, you'll have more productivity as far as your job, or if you're in school, or your relationships, or understanding things, being able to execute things efficiently, execute it with clarity as well. I think that's important too, because when you wake up in the morning and you have chaotic thoughts, how effective do you think you're going to be throughout the day, right? But if you wake up in the morning, you know, you're feeling good, you go through your meditation, your mantras or whatever, you forgive yourself, you have some understandings, and then you have a clear thought as far as how you're going to execute your day. How effective are you going to be with slicing through what God has for you every day? You're going to be very efficient. You're going to reach your goals. Things aren't going to be a challenge to you because every day you're tackling, you're being aggressive with your life. Very, very important. Another thing too, Greater self-respect, right? When you're forgiving someone, it reinforces your own values, but you forgive yourself too, which means that you can relate to other people, right? And I'll give you a story. I remember one time I was talking to some students, and I was explaining to them how I felt, right? I think it was like a graduation or whatever, and I ended up putting some shoes on. I wear size 14 dress shoes. Typically, they come a little small, so I had to wear a bigger one. And I had like a French type of shoe, and it was a little bit longer. And I tried to take a step, and I slipped or whatever. Very embarrassed. But I'm sharing that because I had to be vulnerable, which takes a lot, right? But I had to forgive myself. I had to be vulnerable. The class kind of understood. They got kind of involved. They laughed or whatever. But like, learn how to laugh at yourself, right? We all make mistakes. What lessons did you learn behind that mistake, right? And also having that relatability, I think is really, really important. But it's also respecting yourself and saying, okay, I made a mistake. I learned from it. You're going to feel proud about yourself. You're going to be offering peace. You're going to offer the fact that you can relate to other people, right? And then raise your hand if you've been in situations where, you're embarrassed, right? You can always feel comfortable with somebody when they're sharing something from their heart, which you feel like, okay, yeah, I've been in that situation. It shows that we're human, right? But also, too, you can choose peace over bitterness, right? Another benefit, too, that in the workplace, or let's say you play a sport, right? How many people like sports? Where you're going to have a little bit more teamwork effort, right? You're going to have a teamwork type of mindset. I think is really important. You don't hold any grudges. You let things roll off. When you're with coworkers or you're with teammates or in a relationship, you forgive a colleague who maybe missed a deadline. The two of you collaborate for something smooth moving forward. You forgive your mate, right? Let's say your mate was just having a rough day and they didn't get in contact with you, whatever. You forgive them and you keep it moving, right? You don't really want to hold grudges and kind of keep that going on. Another thing too, improve leadership. I know for me, when I look at the leaders that I really appreciated, I always value those leaders that were very authentic, right? That's something I'm working on myself. They forgive or create this psychological safe space where people could be honest, but we keep it 100. The team feels comfortable with admitting their errors. That doesn't say that we allow those to just continue on. However, we put it out there. We say, okay, it is what it is. But then we realize, okay, we're not going to be punished for it. I mean, intrinsically, we want to do our best. And so it's important for you as a leader to say, okay, we made a mistake, guys. What can we do to do better moving forward? Also, too, you less workplace stress, too, because if there's no resentment, then guess what? Everybody can move forward. The meetings are a lot smoother. People aren't dreading having that conversation, right? Because they're like, okay, here we go. Like that old adage when you get called to the principal's office, you're like, okay, am I going to get suspended? Are they going to call my mom, my dad, and we carry that on. Like if we go to the doctor's office, we feel some kind of way, like we feel like we're punished, right? And so changing that mindset where we forgive ourselves and we say, okay, what did I learn behind this lesson? How can I move forward and grow behind it? And just be mindful how we're criticizing ourselves and forgive ourselves for things. Also, too, forgiveness is going to promote emotional static. It's going to create, I would say, a happy type of personality. People want to work with you if they feel like, okay, you're forgiving. Nobody wants to be around somebody where they feel like they're really rigid. And so there's got to be flexibility. Now, I'm not saying that, you should be a pushover, right? That's important. There's balance with that. However, if you give and receive feedback without taking everything personally, it creates a nice energy as far as people feeling like you're approachable, a nice little experience as far as like, if somebody made a mistake, they can say, yo, I made a mistake, and we can keep it moving, right? And then we're working towards solutions as opposed to getting caught up in personality conflicts. So really, really important. Also, it encourages career growth. Okay, people who forgive are seen as mature, emotionally intelligent. Your manager trusts you with bigger decisions and responsibilities, your family, right? Because they could trust you. You own up to yourself. You say, yo, my bad. But it's also important to make it right, too. Let's not just put it out there and then you just say, okay, right? There's certain situations where you got to back off and say, okay, next time I do it better. But it's important to make sure you're taking those steps to make sure you do it better every time. Another thing, too, is going to form stronger bonds. Going back to my dad, I would say we're closer now. as a grown man, I can relate to him because I made mistakes, and I want to make sure that people forgive me for my mistakes. And so I have to be the leader, right? How can I expect somebody to forgive me if I'm not open to forgive, right? That's just not a fair exchange. And so it's important to make sure that, you show the olive branch first and say, hey, you know what, I'm here to forgive. And then you create that space where you lead by example that other people can forgive too. And something else I noticed too, like I've noticed with my dad, because I've been more forgiving and just more lenient, I've noticed that he's calmed down more. Like he's more relaxed. Like I said, we've been going through this transition where we're trying to find him a place right now. There's been a lot of ups and downs with situations that's been very frustrating. And I have to compliment him because he's been very, 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 very hospitable. He's been a team player. He's been really working with me. And, it makes me feel more comfortable to work with him. Right. And so I want to put that out there too. So you form a better bond, healthier parenting, right? If you got children, you communicate with your kids. Hey, son, daughter, I forgive you. How can we make it better? Create that space. But then ask yourself, if you're frustrated, why are you frustrated? Why can't you forgive yourself? Right. And there's still areas of growth with that, right? We're all trying to get better, right, with that. And sometimes it can be psychological, right? And so if you need support, feel free to reach out to the Maassen Group 1@gmail.com. I'll be here to support you because sometimes you might need a professional to sit down with you and help you work through some things. And I'll be there to support you. Okay. All right, guys, real quick. Okay. So make sure you guys help support and make better shows. So we want to donate to our Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio, or go to rainieravenue.world/donate. Okay. Every dollar matters. We want to help support our community radio. Appreciate you guys reaching out and showing love to us. So keep that up. We appreciate that. And also too, you guys know, we got our guest is going to be coming on next after me. Make sure you guys show some love for her. Dr. Tracy Harrell. She'll be on from 6 to 7. The infamous show, Better Together, Living Powerfully. Make sure you guys show some love to her. I'm curious to see what she's going to be talking about. And I just want to say thank you guys. I appreciate for you guys that tapped in. You guys listened to earlier to Thought Life. Beautiful message, what he was saying. And I just want to say, appreciate you guys looking out for us. Show us some love next week and just shout out. Let us know what you guys think. And we'll see you guys next week. Without further ado, peace.